Good evening, everyone. It's Tony here from Lockster Reads on day 6 of Remembrance Reads. I've had a bad day today, mentally speaking. I've been a little unhappy, but I still managed to do some World War One reading today. I read again nothing of Ernest Hemingway. I will pick that up tomorrow, and I have read only 2 things. Well, actually, there's a third thing which I'll mention at the end. But I've only read 2 World War One things today. I read, in parenthesis, part 6, which I'm calling The Calm Before the Storm, and I read C.E. Montague's A Trade Report Only from the Penguin Book of First World War short stories, both of which were rather good. I'll start with the C.E. Montague short story. C.E. Montague was a journalist. He was pretty anti-war before the war actually started. But once it started, he thought, I'll commit myself to this and support the troops. And he ended up joining up at aged 47 by dyeing his white hair black. And he ended the war, I think, as a captain in military intelligence. There's a quote on the Wikipedia page for C.E. Montague that says, it's from Nevinson, the painter, I think, Nevinson. Montague was the only man I knew whose white hair in a single night turned dark through courage, which I think is funny. He's probably most famous, if he's famous at all at this point, for writing Disenchantment in 1922, which is one of the first. It's a collection of articles, but it's one of the first real books critical of how World War One was handled in Britain, particularly looking at how sort of anti-intellectual the generals of the First World War was, and sort of blaming it to some degree on the public school ethos. There's an old poem that says, there's an old quote about the Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton. There's a suggestion in Disenchantment that World War One was the bloodbath it was as a result of the playing fields of Eton. The short story is basically they're placed in a woodland, which they call the garden, and it's a very odd place. There seems to be there are Germans in there, and there are British. The British take over from the French. It's a very odd place. It's an old apple orchard of ancient apple trees. There's a quote early on in it which says, "The light in this seam," and the seam is basically there's a layer of air from 6 foot down, what they call the 6 foot seam, because they were mostly miners in this short story. And the light in the seam, but let me quote: "The light in this seam always appeared to have had something done to it, sifted through branches, refracted, messed about somehow. It was not all that stuff you wanted just at that time. You see the like of it in an eclipse, when the sun gives a queer wink at the earth round the edge of a black mask." Very nice, too, in its place, but the war itself was quite enough out of the common, falling skies all over the place, and your half-dead certainty shaken. And weird things seem to happen. There's a mist that rises as night goes on that goes up to the top of the 6 foot seam and no higher, and it gradually rises through the night, sort of bit by bit. A hound appears. It's all very spooky, and it looks like it's heading towards being some kind of a horror story. It becomes something else by the end, but it's a really interesting story. Actually, it's the best of the 3 that I've read so far, I think. Tomorrow's is by Richard Aldington, who I'll talk a little bit about when I do tomorrow's. And then part 6 of in parenthesis is mainly the sort of waiting around before. It's actually quite a short section. I think it's only 15 pages, and it's mainly them sitting about waiting for the to go up to the front for the offensive. In fact, it ends sometime during the night. They were moved by a guide into their own assembly positions. So part 7 is the is going to be the assault, and is the final chapter of this, of In Parenthesis. There are a couple of quotes I'd like to read. I really enjoyed this section. It's because it's the most sort of, they take the chance when they're bivouacked and waiting. They take the chance to catch up with mates and talk through what's going on. But I'll get on to that. There's on page 135. He says there's also some things that it was useless trying to sleep. It's how it starts, and then he goes on to say, besides which there was a heavy battery operating just beneath the ridge, at a kept interval of minutes, with unnerving inevitability as a malign chronometer, ticking off each discharge and exactly measured progress towards a certain prearranged hour of apocalypse. So there is a sort of ticking clock there in terms of what's happening, and then there's the talk of sort of friendships and things. One of the men in a bivouac gets sent off to be a runner, and it says here that for such breakings away and dissolvings of comradeship and token of division are cause of great anguish when men sense how they stand so perilous and transitory in this world. Which I think is also another little shot at complicated. And then again, to add to the sort of ominousness, there's on page 138 they say, and the noise of carpenters as though they builded some scaffold for a hanging, hammered hollowly. And later on the same page it says, John Ball heard the noise of the carpenters where he squatted to clean his rifle, which hammering brought him disquiet more than the foreboding gunfire, which gathered intensity with every half hour. He wished they'd stopped the hollow tapping. And again, that's a sort of hint at, there's a sort of air of tension. Then he meets up with some friends, and there's a line there where it just says, they talked of ordinary things, and it's like it is the calm before the storm. And for some reason, they talked of cabbages and kings, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, but they talked of ordinary things in this section, and it sort of gives you an idea. This chapter gives you an idea of the sort of matiness and friendliness of people, and then towards the end, it sort of talks about, at the end of the chapter, it talks about you can't really wander off, so people sit together and blah blah blah, and there's a whole air of tension about it. And it says at the end, at the end of that, it says, "Can it be by any manner of means, be that everyone is interiorly in as great a misery and unstably set as you are, and is the essential unity of mankind chiefly demonstrated in this faint-heartedness and breeze right up aptitude?" Tension. Tomorrow they go, they fight, and may fight and die. So that was all I read in terms of World War One reading today. The other thing I did read, and it's the finishing of a project. It's not World War One related, although it starts in the immediate aftermath of World War One. I finished Hearing Secret Harmonies, which is the final book of Anthony Powell's 12-book series, A Dance to the Music of Time, which I've read over the course of this year. I can't recommend this series enough to people. It's superb. It's so well written. It starts in World War One. It starts after the aftermath. Let me get my brain and mouth working at the same time. It starts in the aftermath of World War One, when the main characters are at school, and it goes through to about 1968, including their service in the war. They are public school educated men. Well, there are lots of women in this. There are loads of characters. There are so many characters in this book. It is a series that comes with Hilary Sperling wrote a sort of guide to A Dance to the Music of Time, where you can look up things. It is a sort of British Proust. It's more witty and light-hearted, deceptively witty and like, oh well, not deceptively witty, deceptively light-hearted than Proust, but it's a superb. I would recommend it if you don't want to read, you don't like the look of Proust, and and go for A Dance to the Music of Time. It is 12 books, but they're all about 250 pages, and so it's not a slog of any kind. And there I'm going to rest it because I am unhappy and I think I'm going to go to bed. Like, subscribe, comment. I noticed one of my recent videos went up, was obviously put somewhere where it got lots of views, but almost no interaction. That's not a bad thing. I don't know how this all works. I don't know how the algorithm works. I don't know whether what I'm saying is of interest to anybody. At this point, there's almost a thing of talking to yourself about the books you've read in an attempt to get your brain to understand them. I never intended this channel to be some money-making enterprise. It's more about helping, well, giving an opportunity to talk about books and helping me to understand the books that I'm reading, to read a bit more in depth. So there, that's today's video. Hopefully tomorrow I will be in a better mood. You'll notice this thing is up behind me. That's because I've just done all my laundry and it's hanging behind me, and I didn't think you'd want to look at the drying, washing of a nearly 55-year-old man. So I put this up behind me. It might stay up as ever in videos in the future, although the books behind me is always good. But I'm waffling. So anyway, tomorrow, day 7 of Remembrance Reads. I might recap what Remembrance Reads is all about tomorrow, because I realised that if you haven't seen the introductory video, you're probably wondering what the hell these things are about. In fact, I might put a link to the introductory video down below, so that if this is the first video you've come across, it'll explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And on that note, good night.